want to make for life. And they are going to explain why that's particularly appropriate where ECU is concerned, why we are proud to serve and have that as a lifelong tradition. And so I am very excited today to have Dr. Alice Arnold here and Dr. Robbie Quinn. They are from the School of Art and Design. They are like one of our sister schools in the College of Fine Arts and Communication. They're going to talk to you today about service. So you're such, I know you're going to enjoy their presentation. So let's give them a good music welcome today.
Okay. I'm going to wait till this young lady gets seated, and then I'm going to explain who I am and tell you who I am and talk about my life of service. Good afternoon. My name's Alice Arnold, and I'm a professor of art in the School of Art at ECU. Today I'm going to talk about a life of service, and I have a few typed and prepared comments, and then I've got a more casual part where I talk about my service here in Greenville at the Lucille Gorham Intergenerational Community Center, and I do want everybody to have a question, large or small, about this, my presentation today. And we can save those to the end, and we can talk about those too. And then Dr. Quinn's going to talk about his work of service as well, his work in the area of service. I've been teaching art for over 30 years, and I like to think that I've had a life of service to others. Life did not start out that way. I had a very traditional church-going Catholic family with a mom, dad, 3 brothers and sisters. I also had 4 grandparents who lived close and cared for their grandchildren. Yet I was almost unconscious of myself living in a complex world when I was growing up. It was only when I attended my 6th university that I decided to plan to graduate and become a teacher. So I studied and made that happen. I taught for 2 years at Assumption High School in East St. Louis, Illinois. I had very little money because the salary was $4,500 for 12 months. And it was then that I grew up and I learned that life was difficult for many people and much less difficult for others. It was a world of haves and have-nots in America and in many other countries. My worldview was expanding. So after 3 years of teaching, I returned to the University of Illinois to get my master's and doctorate in art education. I remember going to the huge University of Illinois Student Center. I was 29, and students were holding banners to stop apartheid. I had not heard of apartheid, so I asked the young student holding the banner, and she said, "In South Africa, the blacks and whites are kept completely separate. Total segregation and discrimination on grounds of race." My awareness about the needs of others was growing. I joined a group to protest nuclear war. I helped build a replica of a Tomahawk ground-launched nuclear weapon. It was 20 feet long. I protested war and the use of nuclear weapons. I was becoming an activist. And when I left the U of I took several jobs, always in art education. I became an assistant professor. Then I took a job as a lecturer. Then I was an assistant professor again. But my goal became to form to help as many people as I could. We only pass this way but once. I would like to read a quote from Etienne de Gourlay. "I shall pass this way but once. Any good that I can do or any kindness I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." I found this quote on my mother's friend's wall when I was growing up. I took care of their children. I read this when I was in their home at least once. It took on greater meaning in my life. To show as much kindness and love as possible, that was also a goal. Now I had 2 goals, do as much good and show as much kindness. Today I volunteer with my students at the IGCC Center, the Lucille Gorham Intergenerational Community Center. The children are from the poor area of West Greenville, the neighborhood of have-nots. I teach all the children art each semester, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. My college students go with me. They too teach art. First by reading a good book, a Caldecott book, award-winning picture book, and then we make art based on the literacy concepts found in the book. I've been doing this each semester since 2010, over 8 years now. The kids come and they go, but we drive down to in the School of Art and Design van. The kids seem to love their art. They seem to like having ECU students helping them learn. I call it service learning, and it's supported by the mission of ECU. Service to the community is a campus-wide goal, and it meets my personal goals too. I wonder what I will do when I retire. I want to do something meaningful to me and meaningful to others. I don't really like the idea of retiring. It sounds really elderly to me. By the way, I just got started on this thing called career. I have lots of articles to write and lots of presentations to make. Then maybe I will find a job, a volunteer job, that gives me an opportunity to serve others. So now I'd like to know what questions you have about what I just said, anything that you wonder about, and then we can talk about the center just a little bit as well.
I'll show a picture.
Okay.
Got it?
All right. Show a picture of me at the IGC
While
Center.
we're thinking about it.
While we're thinking about it. This is like maybe last year, maybe the year before. Not long ago, because this article, Scaffolding Artistic Accomplishment Through Stories in Art, just was published this month in January, last month in January, in Arts and Activities. So I used my photographs of me and all the kids at the center as motivation for my writing. So tell me what your questions are about my growing up with my 6 universities and campuses before I finally graduated, or my work as an assistant professor and then as a lecturer, and then as an assistant professor again before I came here. And we can talk a little bit about that for a few minutes before I go into the, we have a website too, we have a Facebook site to show you. Make one up. Who wants to make up a question?
Oh gosh.
Yeah. You have a question. Yes.
I was thinking of the replica you're saying, the 20-foot.
Right.
Like, what came about you helping with that?
Good. I belong to I'm really glad you asked that question. I belong to a group called the McKinley Foundation Graduate Student Potluck. So all the graduate students all over campus were invited to the McKinley Foundation. It was like a huge church and foundation. Upstairs we had a huge kitchen and we had hired a cook. And so everybody was talking about what they were doing. And maybe it was through that group, and I don't even remember how I met a group, a very small group of people who were against nuclear war. And I had a shirt, I remember it was a blue shirt with, I think it was doves on it or something like that. But there was a woman in town who had a large garage, and she said, come on over and we will make a complete replica of this ground-launched nuclear missile. And it was 20 feet long. And some of the construction majors put the wood together, the circular wood, and the poles this way of wood and the poles this way of wood. And then we wrapped white tagboard over it. Thank goodness it didn't rain when we were carrying it around town. And then I painted half of it white and half of it black. And on, I think it was the white side, or maybe it was the black side, it was the black side where I had a bullet transforming and mutating into a dove. Not a lot of words, mostly just images. And for me, it was a very, very powerful week in her garage painting the bullet, mutating and changing into a dove. And to this day, I'm very much against war, I'm against violence. I just wrote an article last year about violent video games and what are they doing to us? How are they speaking to children today? I had a conference to go to that spring, and the weekend that they actually took it to various churches and set it up on what are they called, seahorses? Carpenter's horses. They set it up there in various locations. I was gone. I didn't get a chance to do that march. But I think I was more of an activist then than I am now. Today, I call it service learning, which is not really the same. It's more campus-based sorts of activities, very highly sanctioned activities. Back then, I did a lot of photography. I had a Nikon FM, and I took a lot of photographs of marches, of other people marching. So, yeah, maybe I'll put that hat back on a little bit more when I retire. That was a wonderful question. Somebody in the group, we were getting ready to paint the Tomahawk ground launch cruise missile. Somebody said, "Are you an engineer?" And I said, "No, I'm an art teacher. I'm not the engineer." And I didn't even, make the foundation, the armature. That's what we call it. Any other questions about anything? Why did I take 6 years? I had no goals. I was goalless, without goals. And so that was just kind of my mindset. It was the 60s. I graduated from high school in '68. And so if you can remember back, if you can think back to the 60s and the attitudes we had, everything was in the now, everything. It was today. So there was very little concern about tomorrow. Okay, so now let's look at the website if you can.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Lucille Gorham, Okay. As Dennis, as Mr. McConey knows, we've had some transitions lately. The center, the IGCC Center, Intergenerational Community Center, was named after Lucille Gorham. And she spent her entire life, she just died last week at 100 years of age. She spent her entire life at St. Gabriel's Church. And now that old St. Gabriel's at 1100 Ward Street is the site of the IGCC Center. So I just went to her visitation, and lots of her friends, her friends' children and her friends' children's children were there. Her family was there, and it was in the chapel of the St. Gabriel's Church. So that was a wonderful event. But the IGC Center started about 2008, and it started in the ECU School of Social Work by Professor Leslie Bass. She was a doctor of social work, and her colleague and good friend Deborah Moody was also in social work. And they did not do a top-down, this is what you will have there. What they did is they did a bottom-up. They went around the community and they said, okay, we have this wonderful center, this wonderful campus. What would you like? So the people of the community spoke about what they did want. So they walked the streets of West Greenville and they said, what are your needs? And some of the women, the older women, said, we are interested in quilting in a center. We quilt at home, we quilt independently, but we want to be together and have mornings together. So they quilted, they now quilt there at the center there. It's the old convent where the nuns lived, where they quilt. It's also the kind of the administrative building. Across the street is the Ward Elementary School, where they have certified teachers after school for all the children, the different grade schools, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, possibly still 6th. So there's the quilters. There's the YES program, Youth Excelling for Success. And we had a large 21st Century Learning Grant for 6 years. And large, I'm talking about in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we started the program with that wonderful grant. And as I've heard recently from the new director of the Boys and Girls Club, many of those early grants are no longer in process. So that was early money. And that's the program I work with. The children come after school, they're bused to the center, to IGCC, from 6 different elementary schools. The buses go out and pick them up about 3 or 3:30, bring them to the center. Back home, this is their community where they can do their homework. They have a lot of enrichment activities. They go places, maybe the Ashboro Zoo. They go to ECU, they learn to swim, they have just amazing, sometimes keyboarding, they have a lot of art, I know that much. Every month they have art. And I pull in a lot of YouTube videos, I read them, books such as Jane Yolen, Owl of the Moon, who talked about the moons of North Carolina, the owls of North Carolina, and then they make their own owls, and we make an owl tree. Dancing with the Stars was a wonderful event. I went recently, that was a fundraising event, I think about a year ago, and I took a friend, it was $50 a ticket, so it was $100, not beyond my budget, to be able to support the work of the center. And we had wonderful people from the community come, and they danced, it was like a competition. They have a garden, IGCC garden. They grow food, they have food, it's a food distribution center for the people of West Greenville. They have IGCC Fit, people come, do their exercise on a routine, regular basis. They're all about health there, healthy living. In the spring of every year, they have IGCC Day in the spring, and it's a street festival. It's usually on a Saturday. We have live music and food and a lot of fun, but also they have people from the community, the health section will be doing blood pressures and things like that, measurements. But it's to serve all the needs of the community. The newest thing on their website is the book club. So sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. Yeah, and there we've got the different activities of the center. But I've been there for a long time, and I plan on staying with the IGCC Center. It's good to stay with your group if you can. The schools, there's public schools, there's private schools, there's so many schools that need your volunteer help reading to the children. There's faith centers all over Eastern North Carolina. There are churches and faith centers, youth camps. There's the Boys and Girls Club of Eastern North Carolina right here in town. We have the brand new CEO, Kimberly Boyd, and she's the director of 17 clubs of the Coastal Plain. And she, in the last 5 weeks, has been able to get a federal work-study program going there that pays $10 an hour to each student, such as yourself, to teach your craft, your art. And I would suggest that you could get in touch with Kimberly Boyd and find a club, find a site, a building, the Jarvis building, the one on Fire Tower or Farmville, and volunteer maybe one night a week. On Fridays, I think it's like art club on Fridays or maybe music club on Fridays, but find a time and you too can make $10 an hour. In the summer, they have many, many opportunities for volunteerism because they have a very long day. So there's so many places to serve. Don't question your success too much. Maybe the soup kitchen needs volunteers. Don't say, is this the right place? I think all service is right. I have a friend, Tom Williams. He's retired from the Air Force, and he's retired in Eastern North Carolina. He works with my church. He also works with the Sierra Club. And Tom, every quarter, he gets a group of people together and they pick up trash on Corey Road near the Covenant Methodist Church. And they have bags, and they have gloves, and they have vests, and they pick up trash on the side of the road. So here we have this distinguished military man leading the charge to pick up styrofoam cups. We also have Kimberly Boyd serving as the CEO of a major foundation, sharing her leadership skills. So you can start small and work large to work to larger goals. So that's kind of the end of my prepared talk. Robbie?
Okay. Back up a little bit. This chart shows a little bit about how you might see yourself moving into some way to serve, some format by which you might find yourself serving. There's one end of the spectrum here that's student-centered. It's not sort of professionalism, developing your professionalism and using the avenue of service to make that happen. And then there's this sort of other end of the spectrum here where there's sort of a community-centered focus on the service that you provide. So right in the middle, somewhere, is this sort of community-based learning spectrum upon which you could find yourself very happily serving. Here on the left end, where you're thinking perhaps a little bit more about the community than your own professional skill development, you can think about volunteerism or philanthropy, and community service in all the kinds of ways that Dr. Alice has just described. Over here on the right hand, where you're thinking a little bit more about developing your professionalism, think about training that might be related to internships or practica. In our field, art education, the ways in which students find a really happy medium in service and professionalism is to go out into the schools and to volunteer in the schools as they are moving into their student teaching experiences as interns in the public schools. So you can find yourself along this spectrum in one way or another and find that you can have a really excellent and personally motivating experience in service. One of the things that ECU has engaged in is something called NESE, which is the National Survey of Student Engagement. And every 3 years, students have an opportunity to be asked and answer questions on a survey. And the survey asks, what are some things that seem to make a big difference in students' sense of engagement in their collegiate life, in their chosen field of study, and so on and so forth. So first-year students get a chance to answer NESE. Fourth-year students get a chance to answer NESE, and those results are compared across multiple years to see how students are engaging in various practices that seem to be high indicators of engagement. So here's a little note I wanted to share with you. The founding director of NESE, George Koo, asks us as institutions of higher education to aspire that all of you guys, all of our students, would participate in at least 2 what are called high-impact practices over the course of your 4 or 5 or 6 years here at ECU. One should be done, as best recommended, in your first year experience, and one in the context of your major. So I'm hoping that you're starting to put on your thinking hats here about everything you've heard from what Dr. Arnold has shared, and you're starting to think about, okay, well, if the recommendation is to be involved in some kind of high-impact practice, and it seems to be that service learning in particular is one of those high-impact practices, this could be a good way for me to kind of plan out some experiences for my career here at ECU. In addition to the overall picture of the NESE student engagement survey, these high-impact practices are identified as 5 different things that seem to have these kinds of factors that are important. First of all, that their involvement requires considerable time and effort. It's not just something you show up for, check in and check out, but it's something that requires considerable time and effort. It also facilitates learning outside of the classroom, so not just in the 4 walls of your classroom, but outside in some venues. These high-impact practices require meaningful faculty and student interactions. You know your professor, they know you. You guys chat with each other. There are things you do to engage in one another's professional lives. These high-impact practices encourage collaboration with diverse others, people that don't look like you, think like you, act like you, people that are very different than you, people in the community, people in your classrooms who are diverse others. And then these high-impact practices provide frequent and substantive feedback. So you're never in the dark about how things are going with your development as a professional or as a student or as a person. You know how things are going. You're hearing back from folks who you are engaging with in these high-impact practices. So the 5 that have been identified are these, starting on the left there. Internships and student teaching. Is anybody in the group planning to be a music teacher, for example? Let's see like a show of hands or something, okay? All right, cool, like a handful, half a dozen of you guys, all right, cool. So you'll do an internship, you'll do a student teaching experience, you'll have a lot of these boxes checked in that particular experience. Research with faculty. There's lots of things that you can do. I've got a picture there of a guy named Eddie Jacobs, who is one of the professors in the theory composition department. Okay, he's got students that are doing research with him. Anybody had a class with Professor Jacobs yet? All right, there's another handful, half a dozen, okay? All right, so ask him, say, can I participate in some research that you're doing? Let's try to engage. The third thing is the study abroad experience. This is a very high impact practice. Lots of these boxes are checked. We can go to a multitude of locations through ECU study abroad programs. So these are things that we encourage you to do, certainly. Has anybody any interest in going on a study abroad at some point in time while you're here at ECU? All right, now we're talking, man, like half the room at least. Okay, good stuff. So it's a great opportunity, probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so I definitely encourage you to do that. Living learning communities. All right, I should see all the hands in the room. Who's in a living learning community? Right? Okay, that's everybody. Good stuff. Okay, so you're engaging in a high-impact practice. I bet you didn't even know that. Hopefully a lot of these boxes are getting checked for you as you're engaging in that. And then this last one's one that I really want to just hit on again, service learning courses. These are high-impact practices. These are ways in which a lot of these boxes can be checked as you engage meaningfully and do intense work inside and outside of the classroom in your communities. Engaging with diverse others, thinking about lots of life skills, professional skills development through the process of service learning. Is anybody in a service learning class right now that you know of? No, okay, all right. How about in the fall? Did you take one in the fall? Any service learning courses that you know of? Okay, all right. Fair enough. So in the School of Art and Design, we teach a service learning course where we move in and through the community. And that's a picture there at the top right of one of our art education students teaching a service learning course at 3rd Street School. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you define a service learning course? Like,
yeah. Well, in terms of the NESI data, these would be courses perhaps that would be designated as service learning. They would have an SL as a designation when you sign up for them in the course catalog. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the courses that have a service experience, like the ones that Dr. Arnold teaches, are not service learning courses, but that's the idea. There's some way in which you're engaging in some kind of reciprocity with your community. There's a service that needs to be performed. You, as a student, are meeting and identifying ways to solve that particular need, to meet that particular need. So there's everything on the books from going out and offering after-school art classes like we do in the School of Art and Design with our majors, so they can develop teaching skills and meet the need for students to have after-school experiences that enrich what they're doing. There's also things like dog walking class. There are dogs who spend all their days in the pound, unfortunately. So there's a kinesiology class where you can get service learning credit to go out and walk those critters. It's good for you. You're meeting a need. They are obviously getting some love and having some time outside of those poor kennels that they stay in. So there's everything in between. Think about a way in which a service learning course might be something you could do in the future. Just one last chart I'll show you. This is all pretty nerdy, but I wanted to just highlight 2 things from the NESI that I think are pretty important. The top line you'll see there is an indicator from NESE of how many people across the university that actually answered the survey, 435, took a course at this institution that included a community-based project. Okay, so that's 74% of the people who engaged in this survey took a service learning course at some point in time in their ECU experience. So that's a pretty large number. I'm really happy about that. I think that's fantastic. Now, one of the things I'm going to challenge you guys about as a CFAC, College of Fine Arts and Communication faculty member and administrator, I would love to see this number do a lot more like the first number is looking like. I would love to see our number be largely in proportion with that top number. You can see here that as of 2018, 6% of folks who are College of Fine Arts and Communication majors, that's music majors, art majors, theater and dance majors, and comm majors, took a service learning course. I'd love to see that go way, way higher. So you can take an opportunity when you go to register for courses. You look through the course catalog. Look for courses that have that service learning designation. There's a long list of them you can access really, really easily from the course catalog. See if there might be something that really fits well with what you're interested in doing and the kinds of experiences you'd like to have. And then the last thing I'll close with is just a couple of pictures. These are some folks who have done some service learning with kids in the neighborhood, and it's been a really valuable experience for them. They've learned so much, the kids have learned so much, and it's been highly impactful in their lives. So I hope you'll do the same and encourage you to do whatever you can to engage in one of these high impact practices. Anybody got questions for me before I turn it over to Dennis? He's probably got a little more nuts and bolts about other ways to get engaged in a life of service. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know, like, off the top of your head, like, that dog walking class? Like, do you know what course number that is?
I don't. That's a great question. That's a great question.
What's this question again?
What was the course number of the dog walking class?
It's a kinesiology course.
Yeah, it's KINE is the first four letters of the course number. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, what else?
Do you know if there's any service learning courses that apply directly to being music majors?
Music, that's a great question.
Repeat the question if you
So the question is, are there any courses that are service learning designated that are music courses, things that relate specifically to your major? And so that's something I would need to look up myself in order to give you a good answer. So I can probably look that up while Dr. McCunney's talking over the next couple of minutes. Great question.
And there's probably courses, like my course, that is every semester is a service learning course, but I haven't done the paper.
Sure.
I probably need to do that.
Yeah.
But not all sections of Art 3850, Art in the Elementary School, are service learning. So only some sections would be service learning. My class would be. And when I'm driving down to the center, it's about 4 blocks, it takes 5 minutes. And I'm driving them back, my students will say, well, this has been the most important part of the class, is to actually teach children art, rather than have the theory and have the craft practice in the classroom. They're out there where they've actually got 2nd graders or 3rd graders. And so it's kind of where the rubber meets the road, is out there in the schools.
Yeah. I'll get back to you. Let me turn it over to Dr. McCunney. Talk to you a little bit about the Center for Leadership and Civic Engagement and how these things that Dr. Arnold and I have talked about might come into play for you as you're mapping out experiences over the next few years. Great.
So there are about 350 different sections of service learning courses that are offered on average every semester. So 350 across the entire institution. So, and as Dr. Arnold said, there's not all of them have the SL designation, so sometimes it takes a little digging. Some of them might have a community component, some of them might have some civic learning component to them, but there are many more than that. There's just only some that are designated, right? So I'm probably the only thing that stands between you and dinner, right? So I'll be brief here. And share with you a little bit about some of the ways that you can put some of these lessons learned into action and perhaps continuing what you're already doing. So just a couple of brief stories. First, my wife and I, we host an exchange student from China, from near Shanghai. He's 16. And he's very driven, very smart kid. He's actually in my office now in the main student center. And he's got his eyes set on MIT and Caltech.
Nice.
And he's applying to Harvard and Duke and all these sort of like top Tier 1 schools, what have you, Ivy League schools. Not saying they're any better, just, you know, they're super competitive schools. So my question to him though is all the time, why do you want to go to MIT, right? Well, because it's prestigious, Mr. Dennis. He calls him Mr. Dennis. It's prestigious. He's like, well, why does that matter, right? Well, because, you know, that means personal success, and that means that you're succeeding, you're being successful. It's like, but why does that matter, right? I keep like, you know, like needling him a little bit to ask him to really think about why does it matter to be successful, right? Why is it really important to go to MIT or Caltech? And he's like, well, you know, because that's what you're supposed to do to succeed, to achieve, whatever. I said, what's most important as one who's on the receiving end of a great education, right? Either here at ECU or at MIT, right? Or Pitt or anywhere, is that you're ultimately using that education in the service of others. And that is what ECU's Serviere mission is all about, to serve. The Latin word servire is to ultimately to serve the public good, to, yes, be personally successful, but to do that through serving the common good, making essentially our world a better place. And while that might take place in a variety of different ways, depending on your skill set and how your skills meet the world's needs, right? That is ultimately kind of the end goal. And ECU wants you to really think carefully about, as a future civic leader, right? We were called the Leadership University in this mission of service, Servire. How are you going to serve? How are you going to use the skills and knowledge and the talents and competencies that you develop here to serve, right? It's not only about, you know, earning a six-figure salary one day, while that's nice and helpful, kind of a good thing and makes things a little easier. It's all about how you serve others. So that's my story about Eddie. It's like I'm always sort of thinking about, well, how is this going to help me serve one day, right? Ultimately. And I don't think he likes when I ask that question, but I kind of have to as an educator, as a dad. So I was at Lucille Gorham's funeral on Friday. As Dr. Arnold said, you know, the namesake of the Lucille Gorham Intergenerational Community Center, this titan of West Greenville, community leader, grandmother and mother, adopted mother to many, many people, mentor, matriarch of many kids. And so she had been a member of St. Gabriel's Church, and you drive through it, if you drive out, you know, up 5th Street towards the Health Sciences campus, you'll see it. She had been a member of St. Gabriel's Church for many, many years, right? Decades and decades. And so she would go to church every day. She would go to try to attend every funeral or every wedding that she could as an active community member of that church. And so this one day, this woman came to the pastor there and said, you know, my husband just passed away, and I'm an active member of this church, but he was not interested in church at all. Would it be okay if we do the funeral here? He said, absolutely, you know, more than welcome. And so they decided to do the church there in that chapel, and Lucille shows up because she goes to every funeral, and she's sitting right there in the front row. And the pastor starts to lead the service and do a sermon, and he realizes that it's like a sea of white people, right? And then there's Lucille, this tiny, sort of aging African-American woman, sitting there all by herself. And you know, you go to church, right? Sometimes you do a sign of peace or the kiss of peace, the exchange of peace. And he says, everybody, you know, exchange peace. Everybody's exchanging peace with themselves and not Mrs. Gorham. she's all left out. And so she turns to this big guy next to her, hits him on the side, shakes his hand really vigorously, kind of squeezes his hand, and says, "Peace be with you, peace be with you," right? So the pastor notices that. Later on that day, the pastor calls his friend, who's the pastor of St. Peter's down here, and said, yeah, they were just kind of chatting, and said, how'd that funeral go, right? And the other pastor says, well, I hope it went well, because that was a touchy one, because that guy was a key figure in the local chapter of the KKK. And the pastor's like, I had no idea, right, that this guy was a leader in the KKK. So he's not sure how he's going to talk to Lucille after that. He sees her the next day. She's like this tall. He's like this, right? And he goes, Lucille, I'm so sorry, right? I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was a leader in the KKK. She said, Pastor, it's okay. I have a sixth sense. She goes, I knew. And why do you think I squeezed his hand so hard, right? And she said, we're called to love and forgive everybody unconditionally, right? So this was like the spirit of Lucille that she left and the legacy that she left in West Greenville. And now that center is named after her as one that really serves that community that has been marginalized in many ways, suffering serious poverty, significant achievement issues with the kids there, significant public health issues. And ECU is committed to that center. And so that center is now housed within Student Affairs. That director reports to me. And ECU has put a lot of resources into it. So if you have any inclination in getting involved there as a volunteer, I'd say do it, because they need the help, they need good people, they need commitment. The kids need good role models there. And ECU has invested in that community as a regular partner in doing the work there. So a couple of stories to share with you, just kind of give you that context a little bit. So some of you are involved probably in some service activities here on campus or coming out of high school as well. Center for Leadership and Civic Engagement is formerly known as the Volunteer and Service Learning Center, is our leadership and service center. We work with over 150 different community partners. All of you are on OrgSync, right? Use OrgSync. So all those community partners, including IGCC and Joy Soup Kitchen and Boys and Girls Club, and 3rd Street Community Center, et cetera, are all on OrgSync. And so they're continually posting all their opportunities there. So there are a million different ways for you to get involved. I'll share a couple with you. One is to think about maybe joining one of the days of service that we host. These are all national days of service, so we just did one for MLK Day. We'll do our 4th and final one for Earth Day of Service in April. These are easy ways to spend a few hours with like-minded peers to get to know a different part of the community and another nonprofit in the community. Easy way to kind of add to some of your service hours on OrgSync. And you all know that you can track your service hours on OrgSync, right? So that's one thing. There are 4 of those days of service we offer each year. We support all the service learning courses that, that are offered through the different academic departments. We also offer some student-led programs like Adopt a Grandparent, where we work with McGregor Downs, a senior living facility out near the hospital, to help place students with in mentoring friendships with seniors who are living there. We're on a program called Pirate Pals, which is like a mentoring and tutoring program at different Boys and Girls Clubs, excuse me, in the community. And then we also offer another program called Pirate Playtime, which is like a non-academic mentoring program. All those things are available, always looking for student volunteers. So I encourage you to check out OrgSync on our website to see what's happening. There's always something posted. Excuse me, I'm scratching my throat. If you have questions, we're on the 2nd floor of the main student center, so please come by and see us if you have ideas, or if you want to try to connect your work and your major with a potential service opportunity. There's no reason for you to not be involved, whether it's a couple hours a semester to making a 3 to 5 hour commitment a week. It all depends on your schedule. So we'd encourage you to check it out, and the future is yours. So there's lots of opportunity for you to make a big difference and to be significantly impacted in your own outlook. So thanks.
Cool. Thank you. We have time for questions?
Yeah, we have time for a couple questions.
While you're thinking about those, I looked up the SL courses and answered your question. There are no NUSC courses listed in the catalog, unfortunately, at this moment, but there's lots of others that could knock out some gen ed stuff that you might want to do along the way. It looks like that time class, the KIND class, is personal fitness. So several of those sections would be dog walking, service learning.
So who has questions for Dr. Robbie Quinn, Dennis McCunney, Alice Arnold? We're here to answer your questions. Anything at all. Well, what do you think, Ms. Arnold?
Well, we really appreciate your coming, and this was just so wonderful that they took the time to put together this presentation. I think it was the first time you've done it, so they invested a lot of time in it and in us today. So thank you very much. So you're dismissed, and next week you get a week off, and you can give me your attendance slips if you need.
She's welcome. So she just had an open house, open heart. No big news after how old she was. We looked it up. She was 100. Yeah.
It's kind of a mystery.